Welcome to my channel. Enjoy the content and please like, comment, share and subscribe for more. In the heart of Lagos, where the skyline shimmered with the towers of ambition and opulence, there lived a man whose name alone could open doors and silence conversations. Chief Denzel Okeke was no ordinary man. To the world, he was a titan of industry, a self-made billionaire whose rise from humble beginnings in Nsukka to the marble mansions of Banana Island was the stuff of legends. His face graced magazine covers, his speeches were quoted in business seminars, and his signature sealed multi-million-dollar deals without the need for second meetings. He had built an empire that spanned industries, oil and gas, real estate, telecommunications, tech startups, and even entertainment. If money moved in Nigeria, Chief Okeke had a hand in it. His conglomerate employed thousands, his donations built hospitals and schools, and his philanthropic foundation won awards both locally and abroad. Yet behind all the grandeur, behind the Rolex watches and presidential handshakes, lay a silent ache that no boardroom could address and no fortune could erase. It was not a health crisis or a financial scandal. It was his only son, Denzel. Chief Okeke was a man who could manage oil refineries, negotiate trade deals across continents, and command the loyalty of seasoned executives. But when it came to Denzel, he felt powerless. The boy was a storm he could not calm, a fire he could not quench. He often found himself staring out of his bulletproof window at the glittering lights of Lagos, wondering where he had gone wrong. He gave his son the best of everything: elite education, luxury cars, international travel, access to the who's who of Nigerian society. But in doing so, he had failed to give him the one thing that truly mattered: accountability. Chief Okeke's mansion was a fortress of marble, glass, and gold, guarded by armed security and blooming with imported orchids. But within its walls, silence reigned during family dinners. His wife, Lady Adiz, once the vibrant belle of Enugu high society, now wore worry like a second skin. She prayed daily, clutching her rosary and whispering tearful supplications into the stillness of their prayer room. She pleaded with her husband to discipline the boy, to rein him in before it was too late. But what could Obinna do? He had created a kingdom where his son was the crown prince, and now that the boy had turned into a tyrant, the king had no weapons left. Love had become fear. Hope had become dread. Behind the tall gates of wealth, their home was quietly crumbling under the weight of parental failure. Denzel Okeke was the embodiment of entitlement. From the moment he opened his eyes to the world, luxury was his cradle. His nursery was filled with toys imported from Europe, his nannies spoke French and English fluently, and his birthday parties made headlines in lifestyle magazines. By the time he was 6, he had flown first class more times than most Nigerians would in a lifetime. His education was a parade of elite schools across 3 continents, but instead of molding him into a global citizen, it fed his ego. He believed rules were for others, not for the son of Chief Okeke. Teachers feared to discipline him. School authorities bent policies to avoid losing donations from his father, and even classmates treated him like royalty, whether they liked him or not. He grew up in a bubble where consequence did not exist. At 17, he crashed his first Ferrari, an obnoxiously red beast his father had bought him after his IGs, into a police checkpoint. No one was hurt, but instead of remorse, Denzel mocked the officers, filmed a video laughing about how they flew like chickens, and uploaded it to social media. The video went viral. His followers celebrated him. His father paid for damages quietly. At 19, he assaulted a bouncer at an exclusive club in Victoria Island after being told he couldn't enter with 3 underage girls. He was banned. The next evening, he returned with a blank check and bought partial ownership of the club. He renamed it The Throne, and it became infamous as Lagos' most decadent nightlife spot, where rules dissolved and excess ruled. By 23, Denzel had transformed into a walking storm of arrogance and opulence. He wore custom suits flown in from Italy, his cologne cost more than most people's rent, and he changed cars like others changed shirts. His Instagram was a shrine to wastefulness. Wads of cash tossed in the air, champagne poured over watches, exotic animals treated like pets, and captions that mocked the poor. Rich by birth. Fear my bloodline, read one infamous post. He was the kind of man who would walk into a room and demand the spotlight, not because he had something meaningful to say, but because silence made him feel invisible. He challenged people to fights in public, insulted waiters, slapped policemen, and got away with it all because his father was Chief Denzel Okeke. His arrogance was not loud. It was deafening. Wherever he went, people looked away or bowed out of fear. And if anyone dared question him, he unleashed a fury fueled by privilege and impunity. "Do you know who I am?" he would bark. "Do you know who my father is?" It was more than a question. It was a threat, a proclamation, a spell he used to bend reality in his favor. But what Denzel never understood, what no one dared to tell him, was that the weight of a father's name cannot carry a man forever. One day the echo would fade. One day the world would no longer care whose son he was. And on that day he would have nothing left to stand on but the kind of man he had chosen to become. That day was coming. His parents tried. God knows they tried. Chief Okeke, despite the granite image he projected to the world, was a man slowly breaking inside. Beneath the suits tailored in Milan and the glasses of vintage wine at state functions, there was a father losing sleep over a son he no longer recognized. At night, he and his wife Adiz would sit together in their grand living room, surrounded by priceless art and silence heavy with regret. The chandeliers above sparkled, mocking the darkness that had grown between them and their only child. Adiz, once the jewel of their social circle, had been reduced to a woman with constant tears behind her eyes and rosary beads permanently wrapped around her fingers. She prayed over her son every morning, sprinkling holy water in his room, fasting on his behalf, even visiting prophets in secret. Anything to bring him back from the edge. Sometimes she would gather the courage to speak to Denzel directly. She'd find him lounging by the pool or preparing for another night out, and she'd plead with him, not with anger but with that desperate tenderness only a mother can summon. "Hi son," she would say, "please, life is not always like this. Money is not everything. Humble yourself, listen to those around you." But he would scoff, brush past her like she was one of the many housemaids, and say with a smirk, "Mummy, relax. Nobody is touching me. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my father is?" That sentence had become more than his reply. It had become his identity. It was his anthem, his armor, his weapon. Whether facing angry security guards, aggrieved neighbors, waiters he berated, or even police officers, Denzel wielded those words like a royal seal. "Do you know who I am?" And most times the world would step aside. Because they did know. They knew he was the son of the mighty Chief Denzel Okeke. But what they didn't know, or were too afraid to admit, was that the boy was falling. Fast. And then came the evening that changed everything. It was a humid Friday night, the kind when Lagos pulsed with the energy of weekend indulgence. Denzel's matte black Ferrari screamed down the Lekki Expressway, slicing through traffic like a blade. His music thudded, foreign rap, loud and boastful, echoing the chaos in his own spirit. He had just left a private yacht party on the island, high on attention and liquor, when his phone buzzed. A message from a girl he had danced with the night before. A model or maybe an influencer he couldn't recall. He reached for the phone with one hand, grinning, not even glancing at the road as he swerved into a quieter side street near Victoria Garden City. In that instant fate intervened. An old woman was crossing the road, slowly, cautiously, gripping a worn walking stick with both hands. She was draped in a faded ochre wrapper, her back hunched with age, her steps as tentative as a whisper. She had no idea a roaring machine was bearing down on her, driven by a man who thought the world owed him its roads. Denzel didn't see her in time. The brakes screeched. Rubber burned. Metal groaned. And then, impact. The sound was sickening. A dull, heavy thud that seemed to echo down the street and beyond. The woman hit the ground like a sack of rice, her stick snapping beneath her, her body motionless for a moment. Denzel slammed the door and stepped out. Not in panic, not in fear, but in pure irritation. "What the hell?" he barked. "Are you blind, old woman? You just stay walka anyhow? Do you want to die on the road? You're lucky it's me that hit you, not a trailer. You should be thanking God." Bystanders began to gather, their faces a mixture of shock and disgust. But before anyone could intervene, the old woman slowly, painfully lifted herself to a seated position. Her lips were cracked, her hands trembling, but her eyes burned with something deeper than pain, something eternal. She raised her right hand, not to curse, not to hit, but to speak. "Your father's name may open doors," she said, her voice thin but firm like brittle glass, "but it will not save your soul." The crowd went still. A cold hush fell over the street. "You have cursed yourself this day, child," she continued. "Mark it. Until you bow your proud head and apologize to a child of no name, of no power, of no place. Your days will rot like mangoes left too long in the sun. Your joy will turn sour. Your name will mean nothing. You will chase peace and find shadows." Denzel stared at her for a second, then burst out laughing. A cruel, loud, condescending laugh that cut through the tension like a whip. "Mad woman," he spat, brushing imaginary dust off his shirt. "Keep your village curses to yourself." He turned, slid back into his Ferrari and spun the tires hard, sending dust and gravel flying as he roared away into the Lagos night. But something had shifted in the air. At first nothing seemed different. The clubs still opened their velvet ropes for him. His account still overflowed with millions. His phone still buzzed with messages from girls and hangers-on. But beneath the surface, like a silent illness, the curse began its work. Slow, creeping, devastating. The contracts his father once secured effortlessly began slipping away. A scandal emerged around his name. Videos of his violent outbursts leaked online. Influential partners distanced themselves. Then came the accident. A car crash one rainy night that left Denzel in a coma for a week. When he woke, it was to find that half of his friends had abandoned him, and the girl he thought he loved had posted a goodbye note and married a rival. Worse still, Chief Okeke began suffering mysterious losses. Stocks crashed. Legal suits emerged from nowhere. His name began to lose its shine. Superstitions grew within the house, whispers that the ancestors were angry. Adiz, once composed and graceful, cried at night, clutching her rosary in trembling hands. Still Denzel would not bend. His pride, fed since birth, would not let him believe in the power of an old woman's words. He drank more, gambled more, lost more. Years passed. The world changed, but Denzel did not. Then one rainy afternoon something happened. It was a gray afternoon, the kind that seemed to weep from the skies themselves. Rain washed over Lagos like a baptism, cleansing the dust from the air, smudging the skyline and soaking the forgotten. Denzel, now 30, sat alone in a dingy hotel room in Ajij, a far cry from the high-rise penthouse he once ruled in Ikoyi. His once polished dreadlocks had grown unkempt, his designer clothes replaced by cheap fabrics, and his laughter, once loud and hollow, had fallen into silence. His father had died 2 years ago from a heart attack. Many said it wasn't natural. They whispered that it was from the grief of watching his son crumble under the weight of unseen forces. The Okeke empire was no more, dismantled by debt, lawsuits, and betrayal. His mother, Adiz, had moved to Enugu to live with her sister, her once regal face now shadowed by sorrow. Denzel was alone in every sense of the word. And yet he still remembered the old woman. He saw her in his dreams, her cracked voice echoing in his ears like a ticking clock. "Until you bow your proud head and apologize to a child of no name." But what did that even mean? A child of no name? No power? No place? He had searched for her once years ago. Hired men placed ads. Nothing. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, or perhaps into something beyond the reach of wealth. That rainy afternoon, with nothing left to lose, Denzel wandered the streets aimlessly. Rain soaked his clothes, but he didn't care. He had long lost the need to impress. He drifted toward Mushin Market, a place he had once mocked as filthy and low. Now he moved through it like a ghost among the living. As he turned into a narrow alley, drawn by the sound of children laughing, he saw a little girl sitting on a broken bench. Her hair was matted, her dress torn, and her feet bare. She held a plastic bowl with some roasted groundnuts and was trying to count them with serious intent. She couldn't have been more than 7. Suddenly, a group of boys rushed past and knocked her bowl to the ground, laughing as they ran off. The nuts scattered into the mud, and the girl stared at them with wide, trembling eyes. She knelt quickly, trying to salvage what little she could. Denzel watched from the shadows. Something inside him, something long buried under layers of pride, shifted. He walked up slowly. The girl looked up, startled. "I'm sorry," Denzel said. His voice was low, uncertain. The girl blinked. "I'm so sorry that happened to you," he said again, kneeling beside her. She didn't respond, but her eyes softened. Together they began picking the ground nuts from the mud. Denzel didn't care about the filth or that his knees were soaked. He just knew, without fully understanding why, that this moment mattered. When they finished, she gave him a tiny smile. "Thank you, Uncle." He paused. The smile struck him like lightning. It was innocent, free, and powerful in a way he couldn't explain. A gust of wind blew, followed by a sudden calm in the air. The rain stopped, as if the sky itself had been waiting for this moment. Denzel looked around, the street, the sky, the people passing by. Everything looked lighter. He stood up, stunned. The tightness in his chest that had haunted him for years, gone. The constant ringing in his ears, gone. He felt something he hadn't felt in over a decade. Peace. And then he understood. The curse had not been lifted by wealth or status or desperate searching. It was broken the moment he truly humbled himself and saw another human, someone beneath him, as worthy of respect, of kindness, of an apology. The child of no name, of no power, of no place. The curse was never about the old woman. It was about his heart. From that day forward, Denzel Okeke was no longer the man the world had known. The reckless prince of Lagos nightlife, the arrogant heir of a fallen empire. Something had shifted deep within him, beyond explanation, beyond science or logic. The peace he felt that afternoon remained with him, not fleeting like before, but anchored, steady. It was not the peace of a man who had everything, but the serenity of one who finally understood the value of humility. He didn't tell anyone about the little girl, not at first. Her name, he later learned, was Amara. She lived in a shack with her blind grandmother and sold roasted groundnuts every day after school to support them. Her mother had died giving birth, and her father had disappeared years ago. She truly was a child of no name, no power, no place. Denzel began returning to see her, not out of guilt but out of a growing sense of duty. He helped her clean the mud off her feet, fixed the broken bench where she sat, and eventually paid her school fees. At first, the community watched in silence, suspicious of the once infamous Okeke son. But over time they saw a different man emerging from the shadows. He stopped hiding in cheap hotels and began volunteering at a local youth center. He taught teenage boys about self-worth, discipline, and the traps of entitlement. "Don't chase respect through fear," he would say. "Earn it through kindness." These weren't just words. They were confessions. People began to listen, not because of his name but because of his story. He started organizing small community events, football tournaments, reading sessions, mentorship talks, using his remaining resources not to build an empire but to rebuild lives. Journalists, once eager to mock his downfall, now found themselves writing about his redemption. His transformation reached ears beyond Lagos. NGOs approached him. Schools invited him to speak. One day, during a speech at a youth empowerment conference in Abuja, he stood before a crowd of thousands and shared the full story. From the night he hit the old woman, to the curse, to the apology that freed him. There are curses, he told them. Not always the kind you read in storybooks. Sometimes the worst curses are the ones we carry in our hearts. Pride, arrogance, blindness to the pain of others. And sometimes the only way to break them is to kneel. To apologize. To see the humanity in those we once ignored. There was silence after he spoke. Then a standing ovation. In the years that followed, Denzel built a foundation named after Amara's grandmother, Mama Ijeoma Hope Foundation, dedicated to educating underprivileged children in rural communities. He returned to school himself, studying social work and public policy. He even visited the same alley where he had once hit the old woman. She was gone. No one remembered her name. But Denzel planted a tree there with a plaque that read, "Here began the fall of my pride and the rise of my humanity." And what of Amara? She grew into a graceful young woman, went on to become a teacher, and eventually ran the very foundation that bore her story. She never fully understood the power her innocence had wielded that rainy day. But to Denzel, she would always be the little girl who saved his soul. Years later, as he sat on a plastic chair under that very tree, now tall and full, Denzel watched children laughing and chasing each other through the yard. A soft breeze touched his face. He closed his eyes and smiled. He had once lost everything, but in losing it he had found himself. And in finding himself, he had become something no amount of money could ever buy. A man of honor, of humility, and of purpose.